Good morning. How you all doing there? So we'll have a look around. So that was Translating History, which is by Igor Kozylovov, and it's a really interesting book from for events that are happening now. It's all basically about the arms tests that were signed off by Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. It's basically the very significant part there, I guess, is the bigger picture stuff, where before we get into the whole issue of the Trump issue and what may be likely to happen. And I'm going to stress something here. What I'm telling you today, right now, is a conspiracy theory. This is not a definite hard fact set in stone. It's just my thought goes, if this goes this happens and this happens, this is likely to happen. And I think that's sort of something that, like, oftentimes we have really been badly educated on this understanding. There's nothing wrong with a conspiracy theory if you're putting it out as a tool for making people think and get the thousand minds. Go, oh, what do you consider? Like, that's fine. It's when you try and make out that your conspiracy theory is the truth that you're being dishonest. Now, this is the line. Like, I've over the years written many pieces. Some of them are conspiracy theories, and I don't have a problem with them. And I will say that they are conspiracy theories. They're there just to make you think. Other bits are solid journalism, and it doesn't mean I'm a conspiracy theorist because I've done a few conspiracy pieces. And that's, but again, we've got this whole issue across the whole corporate and intermediaries that nobody actually understands journalism anymore. Nobody actually understands these very subtle but important points. But let's move along, as I say. So the key thing is, back then in the 1980s, was the Russians were basically saying, okay, that the Americans, well, look, all right, we are going bankrupt because we're spending like nearly a third of our money on defence, and so are you, even if it's not, directly, officially your figure's only 4.5. We start to look at all the other indirect means that funding comes from. At the end of the day, you're spending way more of your GDP than you can actually afford on weapons, and so we need to lower the weapons down and get rid of them. And the second point was space, and the Russians basically turned around and said, well, look, we're going to let you go and do it because we're actually crunching numbers, and we've worked out, key thing here, it's not sustainable. Mineral resources basically needed to actually make that happen. You don't have them, and you can't afford them. Straight right where we are right now, one of the critical points about energy in the United States is that there's nearly over 100 minerals that are essential for defence, which America just has run out of. So, but when you look at, like, in terms of like the old Dr. Strangelove, and they're like talking about that person has more mine shafts than us, and it's the same situation. When you just purely remove the emotion, you crunch the stuff into the calculator. It's a game plan that unless the US can actually get basically Russia to break now all of their project for a new American century, it's game over, and things will have to move pretty damn quick for that actually to change, and that will require some serious regime changes and moving around of key elements on the board. Enter Trump. Now, back on that book as well, we find as in 1997 is that Donald Trump next to Kennedy, I think it's Ted Kennedy, who later, I think, did what all Kennedys do, and Al Gore, noted by the translator Igor as being presidential nominees. And that's back as far as 1980. Now, the whole issue also about the whole thing is what we need to take into account here is that Donald Trump specifically is a apolitical figure. Everyone puts him as a far-right character. That's not correct. If you go back and you kind of look for the sort of the Playboy to make reference to my 1980s misogynist teenage years, you'll find that he was actually largely considered to be very much part of the Democratic scene within the political landscape. And this the movement into the GOP is actually quite a recent development, but it's just basically, at the end of the day, it's a business deal. They made him a better offer. And so when we think of him as representing that, that's the absolute con job we're being sold, that somehow there is a red, blue, and they're fighting against each other. The reality is, when you look at the other aspect from the 1980s and all those guys that are Contra guys, and it's got John Tower, the Secretary of the United States of Defense, later basically very much incriminated in the Bank of Credit Commercial International Affairs, and there's a lovely photo of him and the dude from 60 Minutes, all upon basically on one of Khashoggi's yachts. And of course Donald Trump was actually helping laundering a lot of the money for Khashoggi, who was using Epstein, and that includes the money from the Philippines, from the fall of the Middle of Marcos, shipped through Fiji, brought into the United States in military USC-130 Hercules, and that money was laundered into the real estate market in New York, which Donald Trump had a lot. But of course, again, at the same time, while Donald Trump, the right-wing person, is, supposedly right-wing person, well, at that time, he's busily, hanging out with the Clintons, playing golf with the Clintons. The Trump Tower has been built by the George Soros. So, again, to highlight this point, that people think that he is a right-winger, or he's not. He's just a mercenary, soldier or actor for hire, if you like. So, he pretty much, what we find is that where we are right now is that following the shooting, what the outcome is. Okay, well, let's stick back a little bit further. Okay, so again, what we got the rise with Al Gore. Al Gore's listed as a contender. He goes in to run for the elections in the state of Florida. There was election fixing. This is accepted and reported by New Zealand liberal media, specifically Kim Hill interviewing Wayne Marsden, who says, yes, this technology is occurring, and it's all linked into the people, the same Khashoggi, the same Iran Contra people, the same people that have been dealing with Bush, Clinton, Obama, the same neoliberal, all defined by the people that are pulling these strings. They're not actually in the Oval Office. The guy in the Oval Office is just the front dude. It's the 3 doors down the corridor where you've got the Kissingers and the Snowcrofts and the Frank Colucci's. And these are the guys that stay in the administration in the White House whereas presidents come and go. And they're the ones, they're your deep state. And again, we sort of get on this whole notion like the left for years, since the silencing of Julian Assange and the rise of Trump, have been going, deep state, that's all a conspiracy theory. And now it's become slightly popular again now that they're on the boot. And now they're talking about the deep state, which was always bloody there. But the fact they made the mistake, as does the woke wank, as I like to say, it's always been there. And that's the moment you start buying into this partisan bollocks, and you start to go, you're actually, so again, we look at the people like Calvin Upps and so on and going, well, you're deep state, while they're actually linked into basically Stephen Bannon and the GOP, so they're part of the partisan politics, so they are actually tools of the deep state. And that's how you can tell. If you can follow the money line, and it can lead you right back to the same people, the same banks, you know what? You're not dealing with independent media. And that's all. And same is to be said true of the various so-called minor independent political parties in New Zealand. Basically, okay, so 1987, that technology is then again deployed again. We see during the last elections, the second one, and now the Kim Hill and those sort of people say, no, the American election fixing, that's all bollocks. Well, you can't have it both ways. And the reality is that technology for both is the same companies, which again, link back, if we go back to the Kim Hill Wayne Marsden interview, was actual linked to the same Khashoggi money that we're talking about. So it's the same dirty little swamp that supposedly Bush was going to fucking clean, but didn't. He had all that time to actually release Julian Assange, did nothing. Now they have done it. And that's a curious one. And I'll try we will make a bit of a reference to that at that point, because I do think this is going to be a significant part of what's going to evolve. Now, basically during the Trump period, what we're doing now also is that things like Black Lives Matter, we get the polarization, lines have been drawn, people are forming into little camps, algorithms have been drawn, okay, that person's connected to that person that's been connected. And Donald Trump specifically at that point singles out the Portland AntiFa. Now, very interesting, our little friend here who basically attempted to shoot Donald Trump, guess which group he's connected to? Yeah, that's right, the Portland AntiFa. And of course, they all start wearing the Palestine flags with the same thing as we start to see here down in Goulburn Bay. Like, we've got a little group of people out there, and they're sort of run by what a little woman I refer to as the Dark Witch. And she's got a young Asperger's person. He doesn't probably know anything about Palestine or Israel, but he's running around waving the Palestine flag. And of course, they're waving the Palestine flag and the chemtrail flag and the flat earth flag. And all they're doing is making protesters look radical, strange, and deranged. And that's the point. Meanwhile, she's going, I'm the great fairy godmother. I'm such an alternative person. Put some more money in my Koha jar. It's just fuck. And guess what? That person's father was in the United States. Yeah, that's right. He was a general. Yeah, it's counterinsurgency, I believe, actually. There ain't no sunshine where you go. However, so same situation. Somebody, some guy whispers in that little kid's ear. He turns around. They leave a big door open so they can wander in and just basically take a shoot. Because again, like we've seen the footage of there's like multiple actual Secret Service people sighted it, people in the stadium go point, and they didn't get all the way through, but then they took him out. And it was actually even looks like somebody was actually actually broke orders. But the point is, they're also ducking away. So we have moments where there's actually critical points where there's no eyes camera on it, when protocol would normally say that there'd either be a drone or a helicopter in that area, and as soon as they got something like that, that person would be zeroing on. So at all times, even when there was reasons to duck away or whatever, there would be a constant stream of. So we've got plenty of opportunities for editings here. And so for all we all know, that poor kid, bang, silly, probably put an idea up on his head. He goes off and does it, and now basically all the AntiFa are on the absolute shit list if Donald Trump gets elected, which is very, very likely to occur. Now, there is a but to this whole situation, and the but is the month of October. Now, at the moment, I say the stance that everyone's playing is that, Biden is doing, he's doing everything he could possibly do to lose an election. And so either he'll lose the election and we get Donald Trump, and you have to go, why the hell, why do they bother putting a lame duck candidate unless they actually wanted Trump to actually win, which again goes back to who really pulls it. It's that third office down the hallway from the Oval Office. And so in that particular case scenario, the only thing October is some event occurs which suddenly robs Donald Trump of the suddenly huge surge in points. And we've even seen, Hollywood's now suddenly turning around and being quite deferral to Donald Trump, and Jack Black's just turned around and, cancels talk because somebody says something nasty about Donald Trump. The worm is turning. And a lot of people reading the right and they go, I don't want to be out of a job and be able to get Hollywood contracts. So suddenly I don't think Donald Trump's such a bad guy. It's Ricky Gervais has some very cute statements to say about the hypocrisy of Hollywood, but we'll let Ricky stick with that. So in October, the scenario, something occurs, robs Donald Trump of a success, his current success, or it actually somehow it makes him in a position where he gets to look like a bigger hero, and again, it all makes the Democrats even look stupider because, again, they're weak on defence, weak on diversity. In the perception, I'm talking about public perception, not necessarily what I perceive. And basically afterwards is that we get Donald Trump either through just poor performance of Biden or this October surprise not actually doing anything for the Democrats, because everything else they've done so far has been almost like a deliberate boomerang. And Donald Trump ends up being the president, and the first thing is he's going to be able to go after home. He's already talking about, and there's already millions in contracts all ready to roll out. So, it's a case of looking at what's happening right now and going, shit, they're about to spend a lot of bandages. Why would you buy bandages unless you're about to expect something bad's going to happen? And the AntiFa have also been more increasing. The chat has been increased that AntiFa are linked to Syria and Iran. So again, during the freedom, they were linking freedom, to Russia and China, and never really making any real proof of it. And now we're seeing the reverses, the boots on the other foot, and other treatment are going to get exactly what this is just ting tick 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 tick, so bloody predictable. You think your people would start seeing the patterns. I suspect what I suspect. This is where again I get really into the conspiracy realm. But one of the things I have been focusing on for quite some time is the New York, Baltimore area. And what I started looking at today, and I just cannot find it, is I know somewhere in about 2012 there's an exit strategy that kind of goes north, New York, best route out, and there was basically a counter-terrorism exercise for a dirty bomb area there. And I was really intrigued about that area, and it was almost like it's like how to create a perfect bottleneck. And, unfortunately, I looked and looked. I can't find the article that I actually wrote on that one, but I know that there was an area there that really concentrated me on that highway, because I could see if something happened there, it would really lock in your New York, Manhattan, Baltimore populace into the area. Well, that greater sort of eastern seaboard area. So kind of stretching this upon, I wish I could go back to the area because I can't quite see it. But on the other hand, what I do have is, when we have the event take place with the ship, which is where it lost its steering, and again, this is in Baltimore where they've had, I think it's called, I want to say Blue Stream, but it's the NSA lost control of a malware virus, and it's now creating havoc, and it's being used specifically to attack critical infrastructure. And a lot of the attacks that have been occurring have been significantly all occurring with this whole bomb area. It's almost like a probe, and they're testing the wires to see how the system, so that they get even, because that's how a lot of malware works. Is it's actually by attacking the system and seeing what the counter defense is, and they then learn how to get around the counter defense systems. And this is the pattern that I've been seeing spread over this sort of New York, Baltimore, Greater Washington area over the last pretty much for 5 years. And somebody else has been noticing it too, because they've been having quite regular exercises in that region with helicopters looking for dirty radioactive nuclear material in that particular area. So we come back to the bridge which got crashed into. Now that bridge, and again, oddly enough, the 80s, being a child of the 80s, I remember this stuff. It was talked about during the fact that they didn't have an evacuation plan for the greater New York in the event that some event took place. And this was an episode of Barney Miller. And actually it turns out that since then, they had created an evacuation, especially when they have a reactor meltdown in the area that's sort of, in my mind, I can go New York, cross over the Manhattan Bridge, go north and east, and then just as you go sort of northeast up there's a reactor there, and basically the bridge that you're going southwest, that's the bridge that got run into, and that would be the major evacuation for anybody trying to evacuate from a reactor area. Now, that reactor has also been... There have been a couple of attempts on that by specifically white supremacist groups during the whole kind of Clinton-Obama era. But I imagine the script will change quite radically if it turns out something like that happens and will suddenly be blamed on, I'm guessing, a left-wing element. Although it won't make any sense from the one flaw of my analysts, I find it hard to believe that a left-wing group would use a nuclear reactor dirty bomb because of the environmental factor. It's like, I'm just pointing all those things out, and again, this is a conspiracy theory, so everyone's free to chip in. So that event happens. Basically, you have got a very large casualty numbers there. People can't actually get out of the area, and maybe that again is part of the whole script of swinging around so that the event is basically makes Biden look even weaker, and so we end up with Donald Trump on top because he's very popular with the military. And bang, what happens is he gets elected. Iran gets turned into a slag heap. By that stage, Israel's managed to fucking wipe out most of Palestine, but there's no worries about the Palestine issue there. And America basically ends up, Donald Trump makes peace with the Russians and Chinese. He beats the nuclear bombs into plowshares. And we end up with this world ruled by kleptomaniac strongmen. Each of these guys, Zeman, Putin, this House of Saud, the Benjamin Netanyahu clique, it's all of these guys are all basically despots in their own right, and there is nothing going to be a bright new democratic future if the Brics, even when all these guys outright, people going, the Brics is great, going, well, no, because what you're asking us to do is to choose for a kick in the ball in the left ball or a kick in the right ball. It's still a pretty terrible, basically, economic model. And again, it sort of makes me think again about Davos and old Klaus Schwab saying, no, we will play them against both superpowers against each other. And this is kind of what's happening. You end up with a world where there actually are no superpowers. You just got strong men who are basically strong men there because they're backed basically by corporate interests. And again, it's that issue of pretty much, this whole thing of Trump making peace with the Russians. It doesn't matter because they're going to have to make peace. Whether it was Trump or Putin, they can't carry on because they don't have the minerals necessary to actually give them the space superiority, which is what they thought would actually allow them to basically to suppress the Russians and basically be able to actually entrench their position in that particular area. They weren't able to do it, and time's basically run out. The counter scenario we have here, of course, is that in that situation, the dirty bomb scenario, basically the Americans just have straight away the martial law because it's a national emergency. The other counter scenario is where everything looks like poll-wise, everything blah 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 that Trump's going to get in, and yet somehow because of those funny little election machines, which are the same ones that were blamed under the last Trump election, and the same machines that were Kim Hill blamed Al Gore for the election being stolen. So you can't. It's a conspiracy when the opponent's elections get stolen, but when it's your side, oh no, of course that's the subject. Here's the proof. Here's the evidence. But we'll forget about that when this other time round. But the other scenario is that basically that election gets stolen at the last moment. And it's that it becomes a catalyst for basically a right-wing uprising in the United States. And I'm basing that particular model on not mention that Jade Helm has already run this war game scenario under the Obama administration, and they've already done and Obama has actually talked about these reactionary elements within his own government. So that was as much about internal security exercise Jade Helm as anything. But the one that predates that is Rex 84, which is a war game scenario, basically organised by the IRA and Contra, which is the same, basically all the boys 3 doors down the corridor, all that crowd, and in that particular scenario, Brics 84, which was the scenario of basically kind of using right-wing militia to help take over the government, or the army taking over the military taking over the government, at the same time that they were waging war basically in Central America as they basically rode into South America to get, again, access to those minerals and minerals that we talked about. The basic idea was the Nicaraguans did the punch in the nose defense system, where they basically said, well, you can come in, you can take us, we don't have a problem, we've crunched numbers, we realise this, but we've also fucking flooded ourselves with small arms, so if you come in here, you're going to be going into a non-stop guerrilla war, and the US public are going to see bodies going to be coming back in the droves, and they don't have the stomach for it. And so under this game scenario, they looked at all these factors and they realised that they didn't, even with the support of the right-wing militia, they didn't have the numbers to basically to launch a non-terrorist martial, in other words, a martial or a complete military junta, basically takeover without any pretext. This scenario would probably give them those numbers. And they said they have already run that tabletop security system, and they probably continue to run it and tweak it and adjust it and use the algorithms and mega data. In fact, we know that because after 9/11, one of the people to front up and offer services was Admiral John Poindexter, one of the chief felons in the Iran-Contra affair, who was criminally convicted and then pardoned by the Bush administration, Bush's own role in the Iran-Contra affair was exonerated by the John Tower Commission. Remember I told you about the picture about John Tower and Donald Trump being all being in the same boat with Endon Khashoggi, the Iran-Contra arms dealer. So John Tower was also later, according to Jonathan Gwynn Times, the wild ride with the BCCI, basically he was being bribed by BCCI, so he was bought out by the old Iran-Contra group anyway. But he overran the Tower Commission, which exonerated. So as somebody said, the Tower Commission was the best democracy money could buy. And that basically turned around and kind of said, well, Bush, you're clear. So then Bush was free to pardon all the Iran-Contra people. So the whole thing was another example of yes, there is a deep state. We've already caught them. They were caught, and then they pardoned themselves. And this is what we're seeing with Donald Trump. He got caught, and he's going to pardon himself when he's the president of the United States of America, because that can only happen in America. Okay, so that is the rundown of my little spiel today, and so my flag to recap, any crisis occurred, my area of interest, or my chatter has been deepest around the Baltimore, up northeast New York State area. We've got this malware, which, by the way, was again created by NSA and is an extension of Promise, which has also come out into the models of, we see things like Pegasus. Pegasus has been used to go around and trap and clone people's phones and identities and so on, so that they can then create terrorists that then they blame them for particular events. And basically, effectively, it's a big one massive psyop. But it's like, the whole point about Pegasus was literally going around. We see in New Zealand, Pegasus. We've got Pegasus, that's NSO group, and then again linked into that, you've got people like Cobweb's Technology, which have actually been hired in New Zealand by immigration and the police, and they've been utilising to basically draw up connections between different activists and social groups, and these become the designated terrorists. At the same time that this same model has been used in the United States by ICE, which is the immigration service, and being empowered by the Donald Trump administration. As I said, there are currently billions of dollars waiting. And this is what I find also very significant about the whole issue of the military expenditure. The United States junta relies on the addiction to the military-industrial complex. So if anyone's going to reduce money in nuclear weapons, they've still got to throw the military-industrial complex a bone. So spending that money again instead, or not the same amount, but in terms of you to redraw the calculations of it, so that, okay, you're getting less money, but you're having to spend less overhead, so you're still actually getting more profits. And if you actually turn that model and you turn that into spending that money into domestic homeland security, then that becomes your new conduit for your military-industrial complex. So they get to continue to get their, their trouts and the snuff at the same time. So they're happy and they go along with, supporting the cartel. So that's how I see it going to basically roll. And I said, that is not a hardcore fact. It is all analysis and conjecture and speculation. And if you take it like that as such and talk about it for just a thing, but if it does happen, do bear in mind that these are some of the factors that I was actually looking at. And hopefully I'm completely wrong and Donald Trump doesn't get elected. Actually, to me, it doesn't even matter. I don't really actually care if Donald Trump gets elected or doesn't get elected. What we do know is that those guys in the third offices down the corridor from the Oval Office are going to largely keep on turning America into this big military, industrially fueled kleptocracy, which is effectively driving this organic AI capitalism, which is burning this planet to a fucking crisp and destroying any notion of democracy or the fact that we live on a planet where we all treat each other as equals and we have equal say. And isn't that at the end of the day what everybody wants? Anyway, that was my random thoughts for today.